Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Two World Podcast. I am getting us started today, and I am Barney, and I am joined with my co-host, and he is
Jacob.
And both of us are fathers, and one of the delights of having kids is the unexpected things that they do or say or whatever we observe them doing. And it makes us enjoy those little aspects of life. And it also helps us to kind of reflect on who we are and where we've been in our lives and often think of things a little bit differently. Maybe re-examine the way that the things that we thought about certain things. When we were getting ready, when we were expecting Yuma, I think that maybe I promised myself, probably from observing other people both in America and Japan, I promised myself that if Yuma ever had a question, I would answer it. And I knew that I needed to be ready for the why questions. Hanging around with my nieces and nephews, I knew that there's always that phase when they're young, when lots and lots and lots of why questions come around. And I told myself that no matter what, I would answer them. And I do stay diligent to that. But sometimes the questions, when he's sleepy or I'm sleepy, the why questions, they just don't make a lot of sense, And the best answer I can give him is, well, that's just the way it is, like, something like I say, well, I'm so glad that my favorite team won their hockey game. Why? Well, they're my favorite team and I'm glad that they won. I didn't want them to lose, something like that. But there are a number of other questions on a number of other topics that both of my kids, ages 6.5 and almost 3, ask us. But I thought, and then I proposed this idea to Jacob, and he thought it would be a great topic to talk about today. And if you don't mind, Jacob, would you mind getting us started with some of the questions that your kids have asked you, or maybe still ask you, that would be fun to reflect on today?
Absolutely. I find it interesting that at different stages in their growth, the questions have slightly different focus or nature. And I wanted to start with a question from our oldest, Micah, really asking maybe deeper societal, existential questions, and then move through some of the other ages and types of questions that are being asked by our other kids, our daughter Aubrey, and then our youngest Hannah. So I might start with a question that came from Micah that really caused me to pause for a while and reflect, and it was an opportunity, as you said, to think about our world, to examine my own life and beliefs, and that is related to the events in 2020 with the killing of George Floyd. There was so much going on in our culture and in our world at that time that was disruptive already with the pandemic. And our norms were all turned upside down in terms of social distancing and things that we could and couldn't do. And then this tragic event happened, and there was a powerful response locally here in Worcester. And I'd like to share a picture of that. And it's related to Micah's question. And so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. We had the opportunity locally to come together as a community and to publicly agree and make the statement that we lamented the killing of George Floyd and felt that it was unjust and a tragedy and something that should never happen again. And a variety of the faith communities in Worcester and civic organizations, the NAACP, the College of Worcester, many community partners came together and publicized this gathering downtown in the square to say that we stand in solidarity with the family of George Floyd and the community that he grew up in the midst of this tragedy, and to call for change and reform and renewal in our society, and a yearning for God's healing and justice in our world, and particularly in relation to the area of racism in our country. And so we had this huge gathering. Micah saw this, and he observed people coming together. He observed what people were saying about the problem of racism in our country. He um, reflected on that, and then he asked me about it. And his question first was more like, why do people hate other people just based on the color of their skin? And then it moved to, what can we do about it? And I think there's such big questions, like why do people hate other people? There's a huge um, uh, deep existential aspect to that, of like, we as human beings have that brokenness within us that we can disdain others who are different from us. Um, but then there's the whole aspect of what can we do about it, where it's the question turns on our own response and action to that. Like, are we actively like rooting out the hatred that we have in our own lives? Are we doing something corporately to speak out against hatred in our society? And so Micah asked this question, and I just remember saying, well, I think coming together like this is one thing we can do. And so a few weeks after this event, there were follow-up gatherings, and Micah made a sign, um, and he went with me, and some of his friends from school were there. And I think it felt good for him to be able to also join in this message that we care about all members of our community, that racism is wrong, and that we want to speak out and seek healing um, and change. And so that was really empowering for him to be able to do that. And I'm glad he asked that question. And it was part of maybe observing him growing up and getting to a deeper understanding that he wanted to be uh, engaged and active and bringing positive change in the world in the areas that he could. And so being a part of gatherings like this, and um, other um, relationships that he could form with students or people that he met from different backgrounds, to demonstrate that he cared and wanted to stand in solidarity with others, and show love for them. And so that was a profound time. It was a very tragic and sorrowful time, but it was profound to see Micah wrestling with these questions, and to have the privilege to be a parent in that time and walk alongside him in that.
Mm. Yeah, that's one of those times I think that with everything going on, and you're probably still trying to understand how the event affects yourself, and then process that, and to have one of your children kind of ask that really poignant question that gets to the heart of the matter, and it helps you to maybe better work through what what you're thinking, and trying to come up with answers for yourself when you try to explain it and work through it with one of your kids. um I've kind of wondered about this myself in a way. Like, I've noticed that with Yuma and Silas and I, when we play, and we have our Duplos, or like our brooder figures, we always say, like, orange guy or yellow guy or blue guy, and it's about their clothes. um and Silas has a favorite teacher at his daycare, and there are two teachers that have the same name, and he calls her Black Keiko Sensei, and so her name is Keiko. And we know that, of course, because she wears black pants all the time. And Yuma and I were at my work and chatting, and we were saying, "Oh, so nice that that Silas had a good day at daycare today, and Yuma said, yeah, that's because Black Keiko Sensei was there. And my coworker overheard and gave us this really weird face. And it's like, oh yeah, that's just because she wears black pants, you know. And in Japan here, where most of the community around us, everyone looks fairly similar. It's not something that I think that maybe Yuma is noticing so much about in terms of diversity. Sometimes we run into issues with maybe how I was treated or how I perceived that I was treated, but it usually ends up getting explained that things happened to me, um, maybe because my Japanese isn't as good as it could be, or maybe because people realize that I'm from America. So it kind of takes on more an issue of what country you're from more than how you look at the time with my kids. Yuma's getting ready for elementary school, and that same coworker, she's from Romania, and her one son, he's very fair skinned, and his hair is quite light too, and he had a time where he really didn't enjoy going to school because even though he's from Romania, all the kids called him the American, and he really, really felt, really eh, not excluded, but really the difference was really, magnified in his light. And I think that this might be a question that Yuma and I, or Silas and I, or the three of us, and with Ayako too, maybe the four of us have to eventually talk about from a pretty personal standpoint. But in terms of my young kids now, it's interesting how they really just see people by their clothes, or what they do. And that's how they call people, more than anything. And I try to be conscious of that too. If we see someone on the street, I always say, oh, it's that person with this clothes or that clothes, as opposed to, oh, it's that person that looks like this, or, that
Mm.
looks like that.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I wonder how as you said, as the kids get older, the questions change as they get more life experience and they observe more and have more language and tools for describing the environment around them, how those questions will change over time. But I think you and Ayako will be great dialogue partners in that conversation because you both have a lot of understanding and um, that I think that'll be a really meaningful kind of ongoing conversation to have. Yeah, thanks for sharing that.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe if I could share in a slightly different vein, um, maybe something more personal, a question that's a little bit more related to family directly, and the story of Katie and of me. Aubrey, when she was in middle school and late middle school and moving into high school, started thinking a little bit more about the topic of boy girl relationships and understanding that. And when do boys and girls typically think about dating? When do their parents allow them to talk about and explore dating? Um, for Katie and me, it's something that we really kind of encouraged for later in like in high school, maybe early college. But she still was curious, and she asked what it was like when I first met Katie, how we got to know each other, and so I wanted to share a picture of that from that time when I met Katie here. So I'm going to go ahead and pull that up now. Um, this is a picture of us when we were in college. Um, we met, really got to know each other in 2001. And that was at the end, really the second semester of Katie's sophomore year, and it was my junior year. And so we really got to know each other through our fellowship group, Worcester Christian Fellowship. And it was nice because um, our our relationship developed within the context of a group. And so there were lots of people we could spend time with. We went on a service trip together to Pittsburgh and worked with an organization called Hosanna Industries that helped build homes and re- restore homes. And so it was a chance to get to know each other outside of the context of campus, and then just doing different activities with Worcester Christian Fellowship. They had a coffee house, but I just remember there being a lot of humor and laughter and enjoyment in our early relationship in the context of this group. And there really wasn't a lot of drama initially. It was
Mm,
much more
mm,
like
mm,
this
mm,
time of discovery
mm.
and enjoying getting to know each other in a group. And then we went to Michigan for a leaders training time in this Upper Peninsula camp called Cedar Campus with InterVarsity. And it was really there that Katie and I went deeper in our relationship. We got to take a lot of walks in nature and to talk to each other more, and really realized how much we were drawn to each other and felt like um, what the connection that we had was a gift from God, and it was special. And so when I talk to Aubrey about it, I tend to tell those types of stories, how really our friendship grew first, and it was a foundation on which our dating relationship was built. The friendship in the context of this group, um, and then she will say things like, "Well, Dad, you and Mom are lucky. That just kind of came together, and it's not always that easy." And I thought, oh, that's so interesting. Our stories are so infinitely different in terms of how we meet our significant other. And my daughter, who isn't even yet to that point of dating, but is starting to think about these questions, realizes that it's not always so evident as when people are meeting, that, oh, we should just proceed and our relationship, uh, being on the same page for our relationship to go forward, sometimes takes time for couples to discern, and can be harder or more confusing. So that kind of made me reflect and be grateful in my particular case for the unique gift that we had and the way our relationship developed. But it's also interesting too, because we can tell her that we had our struggles and disagreements, just like any couple. And it's good to be honest about that too, so she doesn't just have a sense that um, dating or a relationship is easy all the time. It involves a lot of sacrifice and work, and I think she has seen that too. And in terms of, as parents, as we try to collaborate and work together in raising them. But it's interesting when your child takes interest in your relationship with your spouse and makes you think a little bit more about it in a different light, when they talk about, well, they're yearning for a companion. They're even though they're young, they still have that desire, and like, oh, it makes me want to pray for her and have that hope that she finds somebody that it feels just right as they meet each other, and um, that it comes together in a way that's very encouraging and um, life-giving and positive. So, um, yeah. Do you have any thoughts as you reflect on your own story in that regard? Or
Yeah, it's it makes me think that I think I know that Ayako and I have talked about um how we met and our wedding a few times, and our kids often want to hear more about that. They're always very curious about it. But there are also times when they're kind of surprised that we had lives before we knew each other. They often think that I lived in Japan at Ayako's house the whole time. Yeah. So
I
I
love it. I
remember,
love it.
yeah, I know. I remember them asking, like, well, didn't you always live at Gigi and Baba's, Ayako's parents' house? And I said, no, I used to live with Grammy and Grandpa. And then, that brought on so many more questions. How did I come to Japan? And, what did I do? And how did we get to know each other? And things like that. And yeah, and our story too is tricky. A little bit for kids to understand, since we met each other in a different country, and then we both went back home to our own countries, and we're still in contact, but then met again in Japan, and then went from there. And yeah, I always wonder, now, Yuma is just playing with the kids that he enjoys spending time with at school. And, sometimes just likes spending time by himself at school as well. But, again, it's one of those things that as he gets older, one of those questions that might come up again. And you're always thinking, what's the best way to guide them so that they, have a really healthy outlook, but have a realistic um, outlook on what relationships really are. Like you said, I like how you really are careful to explain that there's ups and downs, and there's really fun times and tough times, and times that you work through it together, and and that helps your kids see the real richness of a complete relationship is, so that they go into relationships with a better understanding too, hopefully.
Yeah, that's a good point. Thanks, Barney. Maybe if I could share now yet a third
Mm-hmm.
different type of question, one that Hannah has often asked me about, and that is what it was like when I was little and I got into trouble. For some reason, these are her favorite types of stories. And so I'm going to go ahead and share a picture of myself when I was younger. And, um, it's interesting because when I was growing up, um, my parents maybe had a different style of discipline than Katie and I have. And so, and that's probably a product of its era and, where society was at the time, but corporal punishment was more common. So I tell Santa stories about um, how when I would not listen to my parents, um, sometimes if it was something that was considered on the naughtier side, they had a little wooden paddle and they would go and get it out of the top of the wooden chest in the bathroom, and they would come, and I was in trouble.
Oh
They'd
no. Oh no.
give me some swats with the paddle on the
Mm.
bottom. um, and she's like, really, what was that like? I'm like, well, it stung, and I didn't want
Yeah.
that, to happen. And one time I hid the paddle and I went and announced to my parents. I don't know why, but I said, I hid the paddle. And they said, you did? And I said, yes. And they said, well, go get it. And I'm like, why? They're like, you need to get it. And so then I went and
Man.
then they used it on
No.
me. But I don't want to give the impression that they were wanting all the time to paddle me. It was pretty uncommon. More times than not, it was just more a matter of verbal, correction. Now, Jacob, you
Mm,
know better than that.
mm,
So, one story that I've told Hannah about, and this is just just a bizarre one, but I had a friend over and they went with me to the store and my family was doing some shopping. And then when we were done, we came out of the store and there were these pop machines by the front of the store. And so I said to my friend, hey, do you want to get a can of pop? And he said, sure. So I had some change and we each got a can of pop. And then I thought it would be really cool if I leaned against the pop machine and drank my pop. I'd look real cool,
uh,
So I
uh,
leaned back
uh,
and my dad said, come on, Jacob, come on, we need to get going. And he called me several times and I was like in the zone. I was
oh yeah.
really, feeling this vibe of being cool. And so I wasn't coming. And so like my friend got in the car, my parents got in the car, and they started driving away. And when you're a little kid, you don't like think rationally when something happens.
Mm,
Oh, I'm sure, they're just making a point and they're going to stop and wait for me. You think that they're going to leave you. And so I like took off running straight for the vehicle. I didn't look right or left to see if there was traffic. I just started running through the parking lot towards the vehicle, and they stopped right away because I think it shocked them. I don't
mm,
think they thought that I was going to react that way. I think they thought I'd probably just it would get my attention and then they'd swing back around and pick me up. But they said, Jacob, why did you run um, why did you run through the parking lot like that? And I was like crying, I'm like, you were gonna
Oh,
leave me. And my friend had the most uncomfortable expression on his face. His eyes were real big, and he was just kind of looking.
oh yeah.
But this is not a shining moment, I guess, for me, or probably. I think my parents really regretted that at the time, but for some reason, Hannah likes this story. Oh, Hannah's in the background. She says, "I hear you." Um, yes. So anyway, so yeah, we get into trouble, and sometimes, yes, we our parents do something to get our attention,
Mm,
and it works.
mm,
Sometimes our parents, or we, for that matter, as parents, have an approach to correcting our child that later we think, oh, that wasn't a good decision, or I could have done better. And so that's one of the stories where I think my parents were kind of saying that, and it definitely got my attention. But how about for you, Barney? As you think about this topic, when you got into trouble when you were little, are there any memories that jump out to you, or thoughts?
uh, yeah, I don't think I've shared this with my kids yet. I think that one day will probably come up. But yeah, I remember um, at church when even the before the sanctuary was remodeled. I remember this so clearly that we were in the balcony, and I loved being in the balcony. But as number four, the youngest kid, sometimes it was hard for me to kind of contain my excitement for whatever was going on around me, and I would get real chatty, and then sometimes I would get in trouble in that way too with my dad. And I know that I'll probably use this anecdote one day with my kids, but I haven't had the chance yet, and it probably will be hard for them to kind of grasp that idea because I probably, like you say, it's pretty different from how we work with our kids now. Um, we we use since our home, here in Japan is a little bit small. It doesn't really work to have a naughty chair because there's too many interesting things too close by. So I realized that the kind of least inaccessible, most boring place in our house is the stairway. So we have a naughty step instead. Yeah,
Oh.
and we have we have had to put one of our kind of unofficial mascots in our house, Bad Mickey, Mickey Mouse, who often does bad things around our house. And they have wondered, how many minutes does Bad Mickey have to sit on the steps? And he's more than 90 years old. So we have left him on the steps for a long time. But um, yeah, it's interesting. About being a parent. How do you kind of balance out having them feel responsible, but doing it in a constructive way? And I too have had times where I think I could have handled that better, or maybe I wasn't thinking too, where I was focusing too much on making a point and not expecting my kids to react the way that they did. But thankfully, they're so forgiving and on my side in the end that I think that they, despite the times that maybe I didn't make the wisest, didn't carry things out in the smartest way, they still get it. Um, and sometimes they see that I get in trouble even now. And I think that kind of helps deliver the point too. Maybe that helps them to see that really everybody has to deal with some kind of consequences based on their
Yes,
actions.
that's a really good point. And I wondered too if it's okay, as a parent, to admit to your child, sometimes I make mistakes when I'm trying to respond to something that's happened, or if I perceive a problem and I'm interacting with you or other members of our family. Sometimes we make mistakes, and we try, and ideally, if we can learn and grow and listen to other people and be vulnerable, that next time it can be better, or that we can say we're sorry, and seek forgiveness if we've, um, hurt someone their feelings, or they felt it was unreasonable. And so I think that that vulnerability and willingness to listen can go a long way.
Mm.
And if particularly if our children can see we're trying to do the right thing and honor the task of parenting, and with care and love for them. Yeah. It's interesting though when you think about, there's like two aspects to this, kind of what you said earlier, this idea of aging and our children and how they view us. Like it's almost impossible for your kids to think of you outside of the context of your life there in Japan. And if they work really hard, they might be able to theoretically think, oh, our dad was a little boy once, like us, you
Mm.
know. Um, but then there are moments of connection where our kids might understand our childhood, like if they see a toy that we used to have, or they see a movie that we saw when we were little, and we tell them, oh, I saw that when I was your age. It's like, oh, it makes that connection. And I wanted to share a picture with you, and it relates to this topic of questions.
Mhm.
And this picture is an opportunity I had in 2019 during my sabbatical to take our three children to West Alexander Elementary School.
Whoa.
It's no longer functioning as a school. Now it is really a community center, and
Mm.
there is a preschool in it, as well as the like local township offices and local township police department. And but this part of the building, the gymnasium with the stage, is still almost 100% identical to how I remember it
Uh,
when I was an elementary school student. And so I was able to take my kids in the building and explain to them where things happened when I was young, and what I did, and what it was like to be a student there. And they asked all kinds of questions relating it to their experience in school. And um, it was so fun because it bridged that gap we were talking about, of them not really being able to see us as people who have gone through their childhood to the point where they can see us like that, and then actually connect our experience with theirs and compare it. And so this was a very special moment in my life when I got to do that, and I consider it a treasure. So
mhm.
grateful that space still exists, because some elementary schools, when they cease being
Mm.
schools, are torn down. But in this case, I was able to share this with my kids before that happened. So do you have any stories like that where you've connected some part of your childhood with your kids, maybe during a visit here to the U.S. or through some toy or something else?
Yeah, I think exactly. Especially when my parents were getting ready to move, they sent a lot of things back to me here, and my kids were really excited and really curious to see these old toys that showed up. And yeah, that brought a lot of questions about what kind of toy is this, or how did you play with it? And one toy I had that was a transformer that yeah was I think it was a big deal even then when I got to have it. And they had a lot of questions. Why was it such a difficult, why was it kind of difficult for you to get this toy? Why did it take so much effort to get it? And explain about how toys used to be. And I always ran into these toys that of course they look so neat on TV and on the commercials, and they're supposed to have like the little interactive things, like you press a button and like something pops out or something. They never worked for me. you know and explaining that kind of frustration that we had with toys back then, and how, the toys that they have now, they really work. They do what they're supposed to do. And actually, you can even see in my background here an old Lego set. Um, it's the
Wow.
Yeah,
Is that a
it's the King.
castle?
It is. It's the King's Mountain Fortress. And yeah, I had it from elementary school and found it and brought it back with me. And they love hearing about how I liked it so much, and how it was so much fun to put together, and it's so great to play it with them now. And they ask me questions, well, why was it that you liked the castle ones so much? Because I had to like a lot of those other like small little box ones that came with it, or that were also the same theme. And it's fun to be able to answer those questions because it really talks about, um, your hobbies and your likes when you were little, and that kind of interest in castles and that era, it really kind of influenced me and made me feel secure and inspired to study history, and it had a real impact. It guided and shaped the way my life ended up being, and being able to share that with them, and what that interest, that kind of on the side little curiosity I had, how it shaped me growing up. um, it- at the time when you're telling them, they're just interested more in the toy, and you always wonder how much of this is getting through. But I think that eventually they'll think back and maybe find that story to be inspiring in one way or another, I think.
Yeah, that's really interesting, Barney. So we have had some overlap in our experience as parents with this, and that's really neat to hear. Uh, Maybe one final thing that I'd like to share in this topic related to questions is that the questions our children ask not only can enlarge their view of the world, but can enlarge our own view of our world. And there's a real opportunity when a question's asked for growth on all sides. And that's part of that beautiful dynamic with parenting, is that in giving, you receive, and um, in listening to our children, also we discover so many new things too about ourselves. And so I wanted to share this final, actually, it's a set of pictures,
Hmm.
um, and it's related to um, a recent event that happened at Central Christian School at the beginning of October. This is the third time that we've had this event for World Communion Sunday. And basically, it's an opportunity for a number of Mennonite churches in our area to come together to celebrate communion and to also proclaim that we are part of this global body, a global family of people from all different cultures and backgrounds that are connected in their relationship with God. And through Jesus, they're connected with one another. And one thing that's very special about this day is that um, it's a truly intercultural experience, because we bring communities that have different languages and music styles and expressions of worship. So you see in this picture, we have our three worship leaders,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
every part of the service in the program is translated into Swahili, English, and Spanish. So we have on the left Wilanja, who is our Swahili speaking worship leader. In the middle, Shara Lee, who's our English speaking worship leader. And then on the right, Justina, who's our Spanish speaking worship leader. And the three of them led us through this time. And so through prayer, through scripture,
Hmm.
um, through um, song. And another special thing about this time is that we have um, uh, people interacting and learning together. And you see seated here around these tables our participants for the day. We had around 350 people from, I believe it was 10 different churches. And
Mm.
so as we were gathered, choirs performed. A Congolese choir from the Akron Swahili Mennonite Church performed, and the Central Christian Varsity Singers, and
Wow.
my son Micah is a part of that,
Mm.
performed, and then Salem's worship band performed. So it was just a very special time, and then we were able to sing together a multilingual song too, hymn. There's power in the blood, which is people seem to really
Mm.
enjoy that. And afterwards, Micah um, shares with me his questions, but also his appreciation. This is a picture of us together
Yeah.
um, after the event, and it's so interesting. as he was singing with varsity singers, one of the songs that they did has a chorus that is in Swahili,
Hmm.
and it starts out in English, and then they get to this chorus. And I was sitting at a table with a couple of pastors from the Akron Swahili Mennonite Church, and when it came to that point in the chorus, and they heard the language and the melody and Swahili, their faces lit up. And it was
Oh.
very special. And so Michael asked me about this, wasn't that neat, Dad, that we got to do this?
Mm.
And isn't it special that all these people came together? And how did it happen? And I could talk to him a little bit about the story, and 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 I can ask him questions like, "What did you feel when you were up front
Mhm.
singing? And did you make some new friends?" And as we talk about it, the experience enlarged our vision of the world, our experience of the world, and then the conversation we have afterward also draws us into reflection on that. And I think it's one of the most meaningful things being in ministry, um, are to seek after these types of opportunities where we can extend hospitality, receive hospitality, learn something new about people from other backgrounds, and appreciate them and celebrate them. And it does help us grow and have a greater appreciation for what God is doing in our world. And it's like a foretaste of that. The promises we read in Scripture that God is creating this great family of people from all around the world and drawing them together. And it's in heaven that will be ultimately expressed in this great banquet feast. And the days like this, opportunities like this are a foretaste of that, in our normal lives of that. So I'm very grateful. Uh, and I wonder, have you had any intercultural experiences with your children? Have you seen moments where they've gotten a glimpse of something out of the box or out of the normal routine that has made them kind of reflect, oh, this is different, and wow, like how did this happen, Dad? And as you reflect on that with them, it kind of enlarges their view of the world, maybe enlarges your own.
Yeah, it's hard to know when our kids were starting to get older and more aware, then that's when COVID started to become more prominent, and so it was harder to be able to find or attend some events that might be kind of a multicultural uh, gathering area. Um, And then, the biggest thing that sticks out in my mind, of course, was the trip that Yuma and I had to the U.S. Over the summer, and I know that we saw a lot of diversity and a lot of variety when we were in Chicago, in the airport. But I think even then, everyone is kind of there for the same reason. Obviously someone's in the airport, they're traveling, but uh, and you hear different pockets of languages here and there, or see passengers interacting, or staff interacting kind of in a different way than what we would see them doing here in Japan. But um, at the same time, it was hard to kind of get like that kind of real wonderful feel. But maybe now that I think of it, kind of on the opposite end, um, in our travels in Japan or in America, it was maybe so nice and comforting and also unique when we were in Toronto and getting ready to board our flight to Cleveland. And it turned out that the gate agent was from Japan. And maybe that was that kind of rare thing that here we are surrounded by all of these people from North America, mostly. And then here's this one little pocket of home for us. And I think we probably chatted the most about that event, which, we come from a country full of people from Japan. And then, it's only a few hours ago, in fact. And then this really kind of this little blessing, because it ended up being a real blessing. And this woman who is, we just spent time trying to guess, how is it that she got here? Is she on, you know, the, um, the kind of the worker, what is it, the visa exchange program that they have, or is she on this or that? And it was just so neat to have that really unexpected um, chance to share, to meet this other person that we didn't expect to see, who was from a different country that we didn't expect to run into. Um, and but yeah, I also wonder how when our kids have more chances to see these different events, maybe different, in our case, like different parts of kind of old Japanese culture, maybe when we want to have them, get them the chance to see maybe the old taiko drumming, or the shamisen concerts that they used to have. And I know that they kind of have a lot of questions when there are the festivals in the summer that are kind of related, kind of connected with temples. And maybe that will be kind of some things that spark their questions about why this, and isn't this neat, or why don't we do this kind of thing again. But hopefully, yeah, we'll have a really wonderful and meaningful experience like what you guys had, something similar to that, and that we can help them be a part of in the future too.
Yeah, that sounds great, Barney. And I really like how you related that question both to the intercultural experience, but also to familiarity. And when you're in a new space, if you come across somebody from your home culture, that can also be its own um, unique opportunity too to receive that encouragement. I like that. And then like how you related it to aspects of our own culture too that generate questions and heritage and appreciation of that. I like that. Um, so thank you very much for going on this journey with me, talking about the questions that our kids ask and what it calls to mind for us, and new ways of thinking about our own lives in light of them. And I also want to thank our viewers and listeners for joining into this conversation. We really appreciate you, and appreciate you taking time to reflect with us. And we look forward to connecting with you again soon. And until next time, goodbye.